Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Behind the Scenes, where I get the opportunity to sit down and speak to some of the most interesting people in technology. Today, I am very, very excited to speak to the CTO of Atlanta Capital Bank, based down in the Atlanta area, Jeff Balsman. So, Jeff, before we get started, I want to just appreciate and say to you how appreciative I am of the opportunity to speak to you and with you. I've got a lot of questions to ask you, not too many, because I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. But it's a really interesting time to be able to sit down and speak with you. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and running a bank and being a technology leader. I can only imagine that this adds another complexity to your decision making and the responsibility and the requirement set and all the things that really come across your desk. So before we get started, I'd really like to take a moment, and for the folks listening today, just have you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're up to at Atlanta Capital.
I originally got into banking in high school. I used to fix ATM machines after hours. This was way back in the 80s when they were coming out. And then went to work for one of the companies that was driving those ATMs, a core provider, started doing core conversions and things like that, managing operations at night for backups, systems, things like that. And that system was eventually sold to FIS. Before that happened, I went to work for, I think they touted themselves as the first real-time internet-only bank. It was a net bank, and we did a lot of the real-time work in the backgrounds and kept that going. So I learned a lot there because it was kind of, everything was new. And then, as you know, we got into a mortgage market with some purchases that NetBank was doing, and that kind of dragged us under when the market went down in 2005, 2006. And I found a job with Atlanta Capital. They were starting up this bank. I knew someone that was going to be working there, and he referenced me, and went in and talked with him, and they had a pretty good story. It was the largest de novo bank at the time in the country. They started with 125 million. It was a time, in 2007 when the market was, kind of turbulent, and there was some uncertainty there, but there's a lot of good people from Wachovia that were starting it up. And so I agreed to come on board, and basically they had a 4-post rack with one server and nothing else. And so kind of built everything from scratch. And that's kind of how I got into Atlanta Capital.
Wow. So I always find it really interesting, when I have these conversations, to see how people's careers have morphed and just the experiences that come from it. Is there anything from seeing, more of the basic components of banking to now running a fairly sophisticated, publicly traded bank, whether it's technology-wise or compliance-wise? Have you noticed the differences? And if you have, kind of what impact has that made from your decisions of being an executive?
A lot of the online experience I got with NetBank kind of helped with some of the new technologies that were just coming out. And so I was familiar with all of those. We outsource a lot of our systems to Fiserv. So I don't have to manage them like I did at NetBank. We're doing more network application running, security, things like that. But I think kind of everything I had to do at NetBank, you had a title, but you did everything.
Right.
So that kind of prepared me for all this new technology that was coming out, and I'm very familiar with it. And I think as well, so are operations folks that work with us at Atlanta Capital. So they kind of run a lot of those systems and interact with the administrative interfaces on those. And I have to do less of that and more of, security and systems, and working with y'all with our SD-WAN and things like that.
Well, speaking about SD-WAN, I mean, obviously you're on the networking side, you're familiar with the security aspect. How impactful or how important has SD-WAN, I guess, become in terms of your overall, not just necessarily the network architecture, but from a user experience and, you know, the digitization and everything that everybody usually speaks with all these buzzwords? How has that played a part in your technology portfolio?
It gives us more insight into what the traffic is, so we can research things that are happening better. And one of the biggest things is, of course, the cost savings is incredible.
Sure.
You know, we went, I don't even remember what our spend was with AT&T, but I don't think we're considered an important customer of theirs anymore. We've reduced our expense so much per month. So it's been huge for that. And then it also comes with some redundancy that helps us stay up, and you know, the longer we stay up, the better we look.
Right.
So all of those things have really helped us.
And from the, I guess when we're thinking about technology and SD-WAN and, you know, facilities and, you know, bricks and mortar, we are living in this pandemic right now. We're navigating through it. It seems like every day there's something new that we're learning, and we're starting to cope with what this existence is. But, you know, what kind of changes have you started to implement, or where has your mind started to go, knowing that maybe life doesn't go back the way it was? Are you making different changes to maybe the way that, you know, the bank's going to operate, or the different ways of, you know, how your team members interact with the network? How has this pandemic kind of influenced, you know, your organization and how you lead it?
Fortunately, we were starting to use Microsoft Teams late in 2019. I think I'd gotten about 50% adoption through the company. Usually the organizational change is extremely challenging in getting people to actually utilize it. You know, especially bankers who are in sales, yeah, they typically they just don't care about those types of things. So with 50% pushed out already, and you know, our HR department, some of our risk areas were using it, technology and operations were all using it. As soon as the pandemic hit, it was immediate adoption. And so our collaboration, we're in 6 different locations now. We've got a place in Chattanooga, Cobb, Atlanta, you know, various areas around town. And so those differences in locations kind of separated us a little bit from a communication and collaboration perspective. And the pandemic's almost brought us closer together. We have company team meetings monthly where we talk about different things. I think we're having one tomorrow, and we're going to try and scare some employees about security. We've had some problems where we're seeing people using different methodologies for, you know, that's the other thing about cloud and O365 is it's easier for stuff to get in and to get things, which is good for them. But there's also a security aspect to how they're connecting and accessing that information. And that's kind of been, you know, stuff we're having to watch out for and plan for in our budget for next year is, you know, being able to track data better and understand where it's going, who moved it and why. And so we're putting in some systems to be able to do that early next year. And O365, you know, Microsoft's been putting out some data loss prevention reporting and things like that, so you can track stuff better. So that piece really made the transition to COVID easier, but we were also doing a data center migration that we'd kicked off in January. We did the data center migration and just finished it in June, really July of this year. And we did it during COVID.
Wow.
So we were concentrating on that and able to do all of those things during the pandemic. So technology wise, I think we had the tools we needed to continue working.
That's awesome. And those are a lot of big projects. So the ability to implement and execute on it and make sure that it's been seamless for your organization and your end users. You know, some folks that are probably listening in on this and watching, sometimes we skip over the power there, but that's a lot of effort that goes into it, from a planning and implementation, the execution, and then ultimately making sure that it continues on. So, I mean, that's a testament to your ability there to run a technology focused organization. Now, earlier on, you were saying that, you started out, there was something really interesting about ACB. You get in there and it's a lot from the ground up. Now you're in multiple locations. It's starting to scale up. That tells me that there's a culture side to things, right? And that probably drew you to it. And I'm always interested in how business leaders maintain culture. Again, I can't harp on enough. The time that we're living in, obviously, culture is impacted, and working remote and all these different variables that are hitting us. As ACB has continued to grow, and as you've grown with the organization, you've seen it change. How have you made a conscious effort to maintain the culture that you went in with, and not just maintain it? How do you focus on it so that as you continue to grow, that stays in your DNA?
Yeah, and early on, I had a couple managers that I've worked with in the past that came with me to ACB, and one of the things we would always say to each other is, if this is a terrible environment culturally for us, then it's our own fault. In prior companies, we just dealt with what we were given, and that's what we had, but we couldn't influence it as much. Here, we were the influencers, and were the ones that were building it out. So we were trying to do everything better than how it was done by our predecessors at other businesses in same positions. I have constant interaction with my team. Fortunately, it goes between 10 and 15 people usually, but we're constantly meeting monthly. I talk with them daily through Teams usually, and it's video chatting and everything else. And when we have the location up at Chattanooga, and I've got a few people up there, so I'll drive up there and I meet with them and go out to lunch with them up there, and we talk about what's going on up there, concerns, things like that. And we're pretty open dialogue wise with what we feel about, how things are going, not just within our team, but interacting with other teams. We have each other's back, and my manager has my back. And so we kind of look out for each other. And I think team wise, technology and operations specifically, we knock a bunch of projects out, and we're good at working with each other. And we've known each other now. I've been there 14 years. We've known each other so long, the management team, that, we don't have a problem telling each other whatever we want to tell each other. We don't get too nasty, but we're pretty honest with each other about how things are going if they're not going well. So we are willing to make recommendations, and all of those things, just open and honest, really helps.
I love it. So what I picked up from a lot of that is that there's transparency, there's constant communication, but the big thing that really resonated from what you just said to me was accountability, in terms of, you said, look, if culture is getting impacted, whether we're responsible or not, we're part of it. So it's up to you to define out what that is and make sure that every day you're living it. And I think that's a really true statement. I'll just tell you, here for one, we try to practice the same type of practice, where it's the accountability of, it's our organization, right? There's that servitude leadership. If the person to the right or the left isn't really operating, it's going to impact us, and we're always trying to strive and make each other better. So I think that that's a really good point. The accountability, the transparency, and open communication, because sometimes folks don't have that. So being able to build that relationship where you can have that, I think that's a really cool thing. Now, before I get into some of my inside the actor studio type questions for you, from a technology set, is there a technology that you're interested in? Is there something really cool that you've seen? Because I'm sure you always have your eyes on the market, seeing what's out there. But is there something that's exciting you, or you're about to roll up your sleeves and get more involved with?
One of the technologies that's really helped us grow one aspect of our business, I think we're top 30 in the nation in ACH processing.
Hmm.
And so we've grown our ACH business, and we got to design the automation around some of the file movements. There's a lot of checks and balances with, we're doing hundreds of millions. So there's lots of checks and balances around how files move in and then move onto our processor. We're getting balance totals from emails from our clients. They have to get keyed in, match the files. And so building out all of that, we used a system called Flux, and it can do a lot of different things. So we've had to modify that sometimes for our clients because they weren't able to follow our process exactly. But
Sure.
we pretty much are still sticking with the standard that we built. I think we started that in 2009 or 10.
Wow.
And we're still pretty much on the same standard stuff. And it's also enabled us to do a lot of integration with third-party systems. So we do have an option whether we want to run something in-house or we want to have someone else host it, whether it depends on the system. If we have the capabilities to do it in-house, we do, especially if it's going to cost us a lot less. But if it's going to potentially, drive up costs or take more support than we have to offer, then we have it hosted because the vendor is going to take care of us better than we can take care of ourselves. And Flux also allows us to do that integration with those third-party systems. So we've been allowed to grow, exponentially outside of our network that we have to maintain with our partners. And that's helped us integrate all of that and keep us moving.
Awesome. So you did bring something up there that I want to touch on. So you're a fan of that cloud experience and leveraging different third parties or those providers as an extension. That's a way that you're able to really keep an effective, efficient, tight-knit team. When you're looking at, a vendor or a strategic partner, whatever it may be, what are some of the traits you're looking for outside of the technology? Is there something operationally? Is it, the relationship side of it? As you do look at those different parties, what have you found to be something that you look for?
Relationships are huge. So particularly if someone already has an existing relationship with that company or someone in the company, that helps a lot. But then the company's reputation in the industry is also something we look at. And then one of the other big things is how they can support us. Because they're basically an extension of us. They're part of our team. When we sign a contract with them, we have high expectations on the support that they're going to give us. So we make sure all that's embedded in the contract, but we may talk to some of their existing clients and things like that to make sure they're going to be able to kind of hold up their end of the bargain if we sign the deal with them and start working with them. So those are some of the big things that we look for.
So basically, do what you say and say what you do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is a good principle to go by. So,
and that doesn't always happen, but we deal with that when it doesn't go well too.
Yeah, well, that is true. There's a lot of folks out there that overpromise, underdeliver, or have the intentions there. But I think it is a really valid point there that it is all about relationships, to your point, and being able to maintain that is going to be really, really critical. Obviously, we're working in a pandemic, so you probably hear my chief security officer barking in the background. But in the last couple of questions that I do have for you, and these may not necessarily be too technology specific, but you are a CTO. You do run a publicly traded bank. There's a lot of probably stress that comes with that, a lot of fun, a lot of different compliance things. So is there something that keeps you up at night?
Yeah. We were 400 and something employees. Now we're 220 or so, and they all keep me up at night, I think, because we run vulnerability scans on our network. constantly, patch constantly. You know, we do all of these things. We have layered security, but somehow they figure out a way to make their lives easier, but make our lives more challenging from a security perspective. And I don't know what they're going to do next. You know, you're having a smooth day, and then it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and you know something's going on, and you got to drop what you're doing and go figure that out. And then those things last a week or so until that's all resolved. But those types of things,
Right.
you know, the security aspects keep me awake, because it really stops what my team is doing, and we have to redirect and start focusing on something else for a short period and go back to what we need to be doing.
Right. It's interesting because obviously security is such a massive topic. It's pretty much always been, but definitely with the cloud and everything going on there, and thinking about networks, and you got hardware and software, security has just become so much more of a topic, especially on the SD-WAN side. I think every single customer discussion that we get into, or partner or service provider, security becomes a component, whether that's understanding the different security assets in play, or where we can step in there. But from security, I mean, you can invest as much time as possible, but there is that user side of it as well. Just a follow-up question. I mean, how much time are you spending on the user side of it? Is it a constant training and learning and knowledge transfer? Or?
It is. It seems to be amazing. You kind of fall out of your chair when you hear some of the stuff. I could make one of those calendars, the Dilbert calendars, with all of it. But we do a lot of phishing tests. It's pretty constant too. And then we get audited every year, and we do social engineering exams on everybody, and we don't always pass those. And then we annually train stuff, and everybody's got 3 or 4 security classes they have to take about our systems and how we do things and what's acceptable or unacceptable. So we do that pretty regular, and still find that we may have issues from time to time.
Right. So it's just a constant, keeping up with the times, but also making sure that the end user is really part of your technology team as well, because technology is really leading the charge of any organization at this point. Last question I have, and I'm always interested to hear this, is if you turn the corner and you overheard the market speaking about you and ACB, what would you like to hear them say?
Well, we tend to take customers from some of the larger banks, and all of our sales team, they're really good. They've all come from those larger banks. So they know how the larger banks, and our executive teams come from larger banks. So they understand how the processes and those teams at larger banks work, and how their pricing works. So things we like to hear are how well we took care of a client, or how we went the extra mile for them. And we do. We really do. I work nights trying to help clients sometimes with something that's not working for them. And our sales team, on our treasury side, if we can pitch our treasury platform to someone and our pricing, they usually come over to us. It's just getting the opportunity to tell them about it, really. But those are some of the things we like to hear. And when we hear people talking at conferences, which we don't go to right now, but typically those are the types of things we like to hear, is how well we took care of our clients.
I love it. Basically, you got to get more at bats, because if you do, the uniqueness that you have and the capabilities, the product set, the people, the process, your willingness to support it, even from a technology side, you guys will definitely differentiate. That's such a great thing, and I'm sure the market is saying that. You're up to some really interesting things. We really value our relationship with ACB, you, your team. I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us. This is another episode of Behind the Scenes, Chris Tirico, VergX, and I've been joined by Jeff Balsman, CTO, Atlanta Capital Bank. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.